This is Residents in a Room, an official podcast of the American Society of Anesthesiologists, where we go behind the scenes to explore the world from the point of view of anesthesiology residents.
I learned so much about what it took to run a successful academic research lab.
There are just so many physician scientists within FAER that are cheering you on. They're excited. They want you to get funded.
You get to zoom out of your sort of day-to-day clinical work and think about where the field of medicine is going to go over the next few decades.
Welcome to Residents in a Room, the podcast for residents by residents. I'm Lisa Yun, an intern at UCSF, and I'll be your host for today's episode. We're going to jump into the fascinating topic of research careers with two guests who know all about it, Drs. Jonathan Tan and Anjali Ashish Dixit. So firstly, I'm looking forward to learning more about you both. Can you please introduce yourselves and tell our listeners a little bit about your work?
Thank you, Lisa, for having both of us here. It's really wonderful to be on this podcast. I'm Jonathan Tan. I'm a pediatric anesthesiologist currently at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. I'm also the vice chair of analytics and clinical effectiveness, essentially overseeing quality and safety for our combined department of critical care physicians and anesthesiologists. I am moving, though, in the near future, moving to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia later this fall to be the division chief of anesthesiology there. So I'm looking forward to that transition. So it's great to be here. Thank you.
That's awesome. Congratulations, Dr. Tan. Dr. Dixit?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on this podcast. I'm Anjali Dixit. I also happen to be a pediatric anesthesiologist. I'm at Stanford. I'm also a health services researcher. I focus on using large data sets to understand perioperative outcomes. I've been an attending at Stanford for the past 4 years, ever since I finished my fellowship in pediatric anesthesiology, and I'm really excited to talk to you all about a career as a physician scientist.
That's awesome. Thank you both so much for introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about your work. It sounds like you both have had fascinating careers that have brought you all over the country. So to start with, I would like to learn a little bit more about the scope of the research pathways you guys are describing, and specifically, what has your experience been with the FAER and the NIH career pathways? And what have you seen about the universe of careers in research in terms of those arenas? How have they looked for you, and what has your experience been in those fields?
In terms of research itself, the scope is really, really broad. It goes all the way from people who are doing amazing basic science research and discovering the next revolutionary medication, to those who do clinical trials, to people who do more epidemiologic research like me. And ultimately, all of these different types of approaches are meant to improve human health. And I think that that's really exciting because you get to zoom out of your sort of day-to-day clinical work and think about where the field of medicine is going to go over the next few decades. In terms of building a research career, I think the scope is pretty varied. So I think it depends a lot on both your interests and then also which institution you're at, because success in a career in research depends not only on your individual work, but also on your mentors and on your institutional resources. So there are multiple anesthesiology departments around the country that have different types of training pathways for people who are interested in careers as anesthesiologist scientists. These include research-specific pathways during residency, where you have additional time carved out for research, as well as training programs like NIH-funded T32 programs after completing residency. So this is something that I did. I joined Stanford after finishing residency and fellowship, and then I joined the T32 program, which is basically a program that is funded by the NIH and run by a principal investigator at that department. And they generally fund a certain number of spots each year for people who are early stage researchers. So if you get one of these spots, the T32 funds your time. So you have a certain amount of time, like 80%. For me, which was funded and allowed me to spend that much time on my research. And then you spend the rest of the time doing clinical work. And this allows you to have dedicated time to get a lot of research and a lot of sort of headway on your preliminary data before you apply for a bigger award. And then the general pathway after one of those training grants like the T32 is that then you can apply for funding through a big foundation like FAER, which can fund an additional few years. And then you can apply for additional funding through the NIH or other similar organizations. I would also say that you don't necessarily have to be at one of these specific institutions or in a specific pathway to have a successful career in research. For example, I was not in a research specific track during residency, but I still felt like I was interested in research and I wanted to get more involved after finishing fellowship. And I felt like I was able to do that by joining an institution and having really good mentors who helped me along the way. So that's sort of the scope, at least in terms of what I've seen. And I would love to hear if Dr. Tan has additional comments on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really great comprehensive overview of kind of the research landscape and the different pathways. I really loved how you walked us through that. I would say that just to add a few parts to it, that the scope of opportunity for research in anesthesiology is immense. What an opportunity and great time for there to be physician scientists in our field, and along with all the subspecialties within our field, like pediatric anesthesiology or cardiac, critical care, and all the other subspecialties. And the scope is enormous. And I think there are areas of our field that we haven't even touched upon yet. I think in the last couple of years, we saw some work in health equity and epidemiologic approaches to that, and environment, whether that's exposures of our medications and our waste and supply chain, and then health economics as well, and then also just the impact of the environment, kind of the work that I do, the environment and air quality as it relates to perioperative outcomes. So I think there's a lot of work that's familiar, but also so much more that we have to do as a field. And I think all these areas are opportunities for future physician scientists in our field. I think from a FAER standpoint, I have to give so much credit to FAER, the Foundation for Anesthesia Education and Research, just for the impact on my career and also the many physician scientists that are out there right now in practice. FAER's done an amazing job with stimulating research, drawing attention to developing these pathways and careers of supporting young physician scientists in mid-career, and the amount of money, but also mentorship that come with being a part of the FAER programs is fantastic. And I've seen that impact not just in my own career and maybe even why I'm an anesthesiologist today in academics, but also many of my colleagues and many younger faculty as well. So big shout out to FAER for all of their great work supporting physician scientists in our field. That's opened doors to NIH careers and many other funding avenues from other foundations as well. So yeah, there's a huge opportunity in anesthesiology for physician scientists. And I'm really glad we're having this conversation.
That's so exciting to hear as someone who is starting out in residency and is interested in research in the future. It's so wonderful to hear you both talk about the amazing experiences you guys had at your respective institutions and with these huge foundations in terms of gaining support for your research and also great mentorship. This is a question I was planning to save for later, but since you guys have just talked about your experience with these foundations, I would love to ask you about the research fellowship grants that you both were awarded from FAER. Dr. Tan, I understand you were a FAER medical student anesthesia research fellow, and more recently, the recipient of a joint APSF FAER mentored research training grant. And Dr. Dixit, I believe you were on a T32 grant and recently terminated your FAER MRTG for an NIH award. I was wondering if you both could talk about these experiences, how you were able to access these opportunities, and how they've impacted your careers. And I know, Dr. Tan, you talked a little bit about your experience with FAER already, but if there's anything more you'd like to add, we would love to hear.
Yeah, that sounds great. First, I want to say congratulations to Dr. Dixit for that NIH award. Looking forward to hearing about that.
Thanks.
And then just going back also, I was a FAER med student, anesthesia research fellow with the MSARF program way back. It seems like a long time ago at this point. I'm trying to think what year that was. It must have been around, probably 2006 or 2007. It's a funny story how that came to be, and I'll kind of spare all the details, but I actually knew very little about anesthesiology when I was a first year or second year medical student. And I was at a great med school, SUNY Stony Brook, where anesthesiology was a required course for all medical students, which is really amazing. And they had a really great, I would say, interest group, in anesthesiology. And I frankly went to it because there was a free lunch that they were offering during this time period. So I show up and they're talking about this FAER MSARF program. I'm like, wow, this is great. So I looked further into this and then ended up matching and working with out in Stanford with Dr. Alex Macario and Dr. Brendan Carvalho on a health economics kind of approach to some decision making around OB anesthesia. And what a great, great experience that was. It opened my eyes not only to research, but also to what anesthesiologists do and how you can come with a diverse background. I had a public health degree before med school, and to be able to merge public health and healthcare policy and modeling decision making in health economics with anesthesiology was something that was really kind of hard for me to connect. But my FAIR mentors out in Stanford, and also just the FAIR experience and the academic experience and going to the SOAP conference as a med student and presenting and publishing, that really opened my eyes. And I really give a lot of credit to FAIR for where I am today as a academic anesthesiologist. I would even say as an anesthesiologist. So thank you for providing that fellowship when I was a med student. And many years later, I would say about 5 years ago, I was awarded the APSF FAIR Mentored Research Training Grant. I was about 5 years out from graduating my fellowship when I was awarded that, and really was a huge impact on my career and where I am today. And at the time, we were studying the impact of outdoor air quality exposure with healthy kids receiving general anesthesia and what that looks like from having respiratory adverse events in the operating room.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that experience. Yeah, I was also a FAIR MSARP student very recently last year and also had a wonderful experience. So I'm so glad to hear that that experience drew you towards academic research and also towards the field of anesthesiology in general. And Dr. Dixit, we'd love to turn the microphone over to you and ask about your experience with obtaining and making the most of these research fellowship grants.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't know about the FAIR med student opportunities. I would have loved to take advantage of those if I had known. I started learning more about a career in research sort of closer to the end of residency, and then joined the T32 at Stanford after finishing fellowship. And then the next step was to try to get funding to be able to keep funding my time so I could keep working on my projects. And I was lucky enough to get one of the 2-year mentored research training grants through FAIR. So this provided protected time for 2 years. And the funding was really, really instrumental in both allowing me extra time to get my research work done so that I could get some high impact publications and get everything all teed up for applying for an NIH award. And it was also the first time that I had gotten a research grant from a source outside of my institution. So I wrote the grant. It was reviewed by a panel of senior physician scientists at FAIR. I got really good feedback. And then getting it gave me a real boost of confidence because it meant that people even outside of Stanford believed that I had potential as a physician scientist. And one of the other really amazing things about getting the grant is that I got to meet so many other people who are in similar shoes. There's now a whole community of other early career physician scientists who I know who also have gotten funded through FAIR, who I can compare notes with, and they're just really helpful. And knowing so many people makes the science more fun too.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I do feel like you gain such a huge community just by going to conferences and meeting people and networking. And it's exciting to meet people who are doing similar work and also different work and can ask new and interesting questions. So glad that you've both been able to have that opportunity. Something you guys both mentioned is kind of this transition from being someone who works with a PI and collaborates with others to running your own independent projects. And I'm just curious regarding your experience moving through those stepping stones to becoming independent investigators and early career and senior investigators. What mentorship systems and resources did you feel were most important for supporting your career development? And you both have touched on the importance of mentors, but I'm wondering if there are any specific people or resources that you wanted to shout out in particular.
Thank you. It's a great question. Mentorship and sponsorship is such a huge part of this. I think back to what you were mentioning about FAIR, and it wasn't just the funding, but it was also the community. And I'll just throw on top of that, there are just so many, I'd say, physician scientists within FAIR that are cheering you on. They're excited. They want you to get funded. They want to support your career. They want to make sure that you're successful and willing to, of course, share their experience and knowledge along the way. And so you're also getting not just a community, but really experienced, I would say, anesthesiologists and academics that are just cheering you on, which is so wonderful. And when it comes to mentorship, one of the things I've learned along the way is, so much of the research that all of us do might be in a specific niche, right? But a lot of times, a lot of the work is multidisciplinary. And I think it's really important that we think about having mentors and sponsors that are outside of our specific either subspecialty of pediatric anesthesiology, for example, or even anesthesiology. Some of the mentors that have supported me, the grant funding that I've received and the research success, haven't just been anesthesiologists, but they also have been critical care physicians, environmental health scientists, geographers. And so it's been really wonderful to have a diverse set of mentors. And one of the things I've had to learn along the way and I've been encouraged by is actually there's so many people out there that want to, contribute toward improving patient care and patient outcomes. And they may come in non-traditional forms, like someone who creates maps and also looks at air quality and weather patterns. So I would just really encourage everyone to find mentors locally, but also I think broadly in terms of, who's going to help contribute toward your science and your career in different ways.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. I think that I still consider myself an early career researcher. And so I don't know if I've really made a transition that I can, speak to from personal experience about being a senior researcher or an independent researcher. My current grant through the NIH is still a career development award, which means that I have time that is dedicated towards my research as well as continuing to build my network with mentors and even taking additional classes at Stanford to build my research skills. But I definitely echo what Dr. Tan was saying about finding great mentors and then also looking broadly for mentors because different mentors can give you different support in different realms. So, for example, one of my main mentors in medical school, Eric's son, who is also a former FAER grantee, has been instrumental in my career. He's been so generous with ideas and with helping me get publications and think about next steps in my career, and has been really helpful because he's also an anesthesiologist. I also have a whole cadre of other mentors who I can turn to for different things. So I have mentors in addiction medicine, in pain, in epidemiology, various people who can give me advice on the subject matter of my research or the methods, as well as career guidance. So I think that one thing that I've learned is really investing time in fostering relationships with different mentors and understanding the different strengths that different mentors can bring to your team.
That's really helpful to hear. Thank you both for sharing that. And that definitely aligns with some advice that I've been told about forming a mentorship committee early on. And yeah, definitely investing time in fostering those relationships. So thank you for bringing that up. I really liked what you said, Dr. Dixit. I think I was sensing a theme of lifelong learning in your answer, where you mentioned you're taking classes to enhance your research skills. You're constantly, working on developing your interest in academic research. And I was just wondering how both of you are balancing this focus on research and this focus on research productivity with your clinical duties. Would you both mind sharing some light on your daily routine, what your schedules look like, and how you're finding that balance between clinical responsibilities and research productivity?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So yeah, I think that being a physician scientist is super exciting. It's really intellectually stimulating. You get to work with lots of different people in different fields. I also am in the pediatric ORs at the Children's Hospital at Stanford 1 day per week. And then I have the same call commitment as all of my other colleagues, whether they're working in research or doing full-time clinical. So that means that I work some late shifts every month. I work at least one overnight shift every month. I work with trainees, medical students, residents, fellows. I'm part of various educational efforts as part of the residency and fellowship program. So it's a really nice variety, and it's sort of different every day, which is really, really fun. And then I think I mentioned in terms of my time right now, I spend about 80% doing research and 20% doing clinical. And that's sort of my understanding is that, that changes over time. So right now, because I'm more early career, I spend a lot of time doing my own data manipulation and programming and analysis and writing, and that takes a huge amount of time. And over time, many people get bigger grants and they're able to hire people to help them with some of those tasks and start working as more of a team rather than quite so independently. And so then your sort of your daily or weekly schedule might shift with having a little bit more clinical time and a little less research time, but it sort of ebbs and flows over time.
Yeah, I really appreciated how you kind of walk through how it does change over time and for a lot of different reasons too, right? Professionally, but also life events happen as well, and there are personal things that lead to changes. I found that one of the really most important aspects of all of our careers, especially in research and clinical field like anesthesiology, is just to really have wonderful support from department or divisional leadership to foster an environment where there is research time carved out for all those attempts at obtaining funding, external funding, or independent funding. And also, even with having the funding support, to have an environment as a department or a division that continues to foster success over and over again. And I think it's really important to have leadership in the group that really looks out for that and protects that time, protects the career of all of us as we're trying to pursue research that advances patient care. Just kind of going back, I think I've been out from fellowship since 2013 or 2014 or so. So it's been a little bit over 10 years, and totally can resonate how the research time that I've had has probably moved anywhere between 60% down to 40% or 35 and kind of back up again, just depending on different funding sources and different places I've been to. And I can see how that change in time was really helpful, or protected time was helpful to get research done, and also to take advanced classes earlier in my, I would say, career. Ended up going back to school for a master's in clinical informatics, and so there was a lot of time where classes were just at night after the workday ended, and so there's a lot of time I think that a lot of physician scientists put in the evenings and weekends as well, not just the non-clinical time. And I think each individual has to really come up with what balance works really well for them. And the department and division has to really support an environment so that it's not so much on nights and weekends by itself. But certainly, I think when there's crunch time with grants, there's a lot of researchers that are working pretty hard to try to make deadlines and have a good application or some good work products, like great publications out of it. So I think it really varies depending on what stage of the career you're on, like Dr. Dixit saying, and also just what the needs are for the research that you're doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It sounds like your ability to focus time on research and also focus time on clinical duties, that is always in a flux. So it sounds like it's a constant balance, and the amount of time you're able to dedicate to either may wax or wane depending on what stage of training you're in or what year out from fellowship you're in, and also the agreement you're able to come to with your institution. So that makes sense, and I'm glad that you both have had those experiences of negotiating that time, and also sounds like you guys have both done an amazing job protecting that time for yourselves and being so productive in research. So massive admiration for that. My last question as we wrap this up is, what advice do you have for early career trainees who are interested in building an academic career in anesthesiology? Is there something you wish you knew or wish you did earlier in your career that you would advise younger trainees to do?
Think that's a great ending question. I have a lot of thoughts about this. I'd probably just stick to the fact that I would encourage medical students and residents who are interested in a career like this to go out and be a part of FAER or talk to physicians that have been a part of FAER or other anesthesiologists that do research, and to understand that the experience that you might see at your current place or the people that you meet, it's only one piece of the larger academic anesthesiology community and physician scientists. There's such a diversity of practices, diversity of research, diversity of what careers even look like. And one of the beautiful things about, I would say, academic anesthesiology is you can have a very diverse career depending on how you want to play it out and what you think is important for yourself and maybe even your family. So just know that whatever you're seeing now, if it's awesome, that's great. But if you see that I don't really understand how a career in academic anesthesiology might work out, I don't see anyone at my place right now that's successful in that, and yet I'm kind of interested in this, I would just really encourage you to connect at FAIR or connect at ASA. I'd be glad to talk to you or connect you with the right people to talk to you. So yeah, don't be discouraged. I would say there's a whole world out there and a lot of opportunities to be a part of this.
So, Dr. Young, we would love to hear more about what research you've been involved in so far and how you're thinking about whether to try to incorporate research into your career going forward.
Yes, thank you for asking me that question. So The research that I've been involved in has varied quite a bit. When I was an undergraduate at the University of Washington, I was part of a neuroengineering lab, and we were investigating the effects of transcutaneous spinal cord stimulation on improving fine motor function in rats that had cervical spinal cord injuries. So that was more of a translational research, and that was my first introduction to academic research as a whole, I would say. When I entered medical school, I was very interested in a variety of different research methodologies. So I worked with two wonderful medical educators, Doctors Tina Tran and Katie O'Connor, in medical education research. I really loved doing that. And I also, in my third year of medical school, I became interested in anesthesiology, and I joined the FAER MSTAR program. I was lucky enough to be accepted and placed with Dr. Emmett Whitaker in his pediatric anesthesiology lab at the Johns Hopkins University for my FAER MSTAR experience. And he really took me under his wing. I owe him so much for opening my eyes to the rewards and challenges of translational research. And his lab was really a pivotal experience for me. He let me go into the ORs, and we were working with neonatal piglets and inducing strokes. And it was really just an amazing experience. I learned so much about not only the field of anesthesiology from him, but also what it took to run a successful academic research lab. So I owe so much to him, and I think that experience has really motivated me to continue learning more about academic research. Like I said, my research experience has spanned quite a few methodologies, but I think ultimately it comes down to a desire to advance the field further, whether that be through medical and residency education or through translational science that really brings together bench-side and clinical research. As of right now, I'm not really sure what my research career will look like in the future, but talking to you today, I'm very inspired by hearing the path that you've both been able to carve out for yourselves, and very hopeful that one day I'll be able to find a niche of my own in that field.
Thanks, Dr. Young, for just sharing your background and also just the interests that you have and the pathway to get you to where you are now. I had a couple of thoughts. First, Dr. Emmett Whitaker is just fantastic. So it's really wonderful that you've connected with him. And he's a really big champion of a lot of people's careers. And I just enjoy working with him so much in other areas of our subspecialty. And then second, I'd be curious to hear from your perspective, because every, I would say, generation is a little bit different. And what's the take for some of your colleagues regarding having an academic or a research career? What are some of the opportunities or maybe even challenges, and where can departments and divisions really kind of serve the needs of younger residents, and how do we encourage them to go into academic research fields in our field?
Absolutely. Well, full disclaimer, first of all, I am not part of the research track, but I have many friends who are in the research track. And I would say that one of the biggest challenges is something that's probably on all of our minds, which is the recent termination of some NIH funding and the uncertainty regarding funding for a lot of residents and early career researchers right now. So that has definitely been top of mind, especially being at an institution like UCSF that does have research on some topics that have now lost NIH funding. So I would say that is one of the bigger concerns, along with just being able to find protected time, which I think both of you touched on in talking about your experiences, but finding protected time to do research. And also just, I would say like the last challenge that I can say is really top of mind for me is, as an intern, trying to find the time to get engaged with anesthesiology research while at the same time being on off-service rotations and really trying to focus on building my clinical repertoire for this year has left me with not a lot of time to focus on research and my other interests. So I would say those three things: the state of the federal funding, the ability to seek and maintain protected time in one's career, and then thirdly, just trying to survive intern year, have been challenges that me and my fellow interns have seen in entering research. But I do anticipate that at least the intern year barrier will be removed once we enter the rest of our residency training.
I think all those concerns are really valid. I think everyone in the research community is wondering what's going to happen with with funding sources, with all of the federal changes. And I think we'll see over the next few years. Luckily, the NIH is not the only source of funding. And so there are, of course, for early career people, FAER is continuing to be super supportive and even recently increased the amount of money that they're giving out with the MRTG grants. And then there are other large funding sources in the US that I think people will start applying to more and more. So I think in a way, it's nice that you're in residency and you can sort of see over the next few years what happens, what the trends are in terms of funding. And I also wanted to say that it's really important to foster your clinical skills while you're in residency. That's the most important thing. And so you're doing the right thing by focusing on that. And then, as time goes on, as you get into your anesthesia years, maybe you'll have a little bit of time that you can work on a small project, but you don't have to be super, super ambitious and, finish a huge project or get a lot of publications in order to later on be successful if you decide that you want to continue pursuing research. So definitely focus on getting all the clinical knowledge and all the clinical skills that you can right now.
That is definitely reassuring to hear. All right. Thank you both so much for being on today's podcast. It was really a pleasure talking to both of you. And your advice is, I know, going to touch so many people and motivate many people to hopefully get excited about careers in research. So thank you both again, and come back again soon for Residents in a Room, the podcast for residents by residents.
Get to know your new knowledge assistant, BeaconBot. Just for ASA members, with a focus on anesthesiology content and information not widely or publicly available. Ask a question today at asahq.org/BeaconBot. Join us for Residents in a Room, where we'll share timely info, advice, and resources designed to help residents succeed in residency and beyond. Find us wherever you get your podcasts, or visit asahq.org/podcasts for more.